Hello, and welcome to the Mozilla Developer Roadshow in Ho Chi Minh. I'd like to thank, before we get started, the wonderful people here at Dreamplex for hosting us. It's a beautiful venue. We're really excited to be here. I think this is the first Mozilla developer event we've done here in Ho Chi Minh, and I think possibly Vietnam. So we're all really excited to be here, and thank everyone for coming. So how many people here know Firefox? You know Mozilla? Are you aware that Mozilla is a non-profit company? Yeah? Oh, great. OK, so you make my life easy. So my name is Ali Spivak. I work for Mozilla. I run a big chunk of our developer outreach department, which is also known generally as developer relations. You can find me on Twitter, Ali Spivak. I've been at Mozilla a little over 5 years now, mostly running MDN, which is our web developer documentation site. And I also help sort of be the executive sponsor of events like this. So I'm really happy to be here. So our schedule for tonight, I'm going to talk a little bit, oh, there we go. I'm going to talk a little bit about, is that all right? I hear it kind of going in and out. Does it sound all right? OK. I'm going to talk a little bit about Firefox and some of the work we're doing at Mozilla around new technologies. And then Fabienne will talk about WebVR and A-Frame. And then Huijing will talk about web design. And we will finish up with Vitaly talking about responsive design. So we have a great lineup for you. I hope everyone's going to enjoy it. I'd like to mention really quickly, Mozilla and all the events that we do have a code of conduct. There's a lot of words here, but just remember that the whole point of this event is for everyone to enjoy themselves, have fun, feel welcome. So keep that in mind when you're interacting with people. Be kind, be nice. It's an important part of the events that we throw to make sure that the people, everyone who's here, feels like they belong. So Mozilla, in addition to being a nonprofit, is also an open source company, and there's a lot of ways that you can join Mozilla. You can contribute to our code base, so all of our projects are open source. We're always looking for people to help us contribute code. We also have something called Outreachy, which is getting diverse interns into Mozilla. It's a fabulous program, and we're always looking for people. We also have WebVR projects. We have our WebVR demo set up over there. Once we finish doing speakers, having talks, you are more than welcome to go and try out some of our VR programs. They're fun. A-Painter, which is the main thing that we're demoing, is kind of a great way to get familiar with VR if you're not already. And then we also obviously are always hiring at Mozilla. There's our career site. So everyone said pretty much everyone's familiar with Firefox. How familiar are you with the different sort of branches of Firefox? Does anybody here use Nightly? Does anybody know what Nightly is? Aha. All right, good. So we have 3 different, essentially, editions or branches of Firefox. We have the general or release Firefox. That's the standard one that everyone uses. That's currently what we call version 55. So it's the 55th time that we've released Firefox. We release on every roughly 6 weeks. We're currently at 55 next week. We'll be moving to Firefox 56, and I'll talk in a minute about what that all means. And then we have a very large release coming up in November, which is our 57, which is a massive performance increase, and also a new look and feel for Firefox. Before the release, we have what we call Developer Edition or Beta, and this is a pre-release version of Firefox that is very specifically designed for developers. So it gives you an extra 6 weeks to try out new features as they're coming out in Firefox on a fairly stable platform. I say fairly stable because it is obviously a pre-release channel, but it's a good chance if there's something coming out, say CSS Grid, which was sort of our big release over the summer. If you want a chance to play with Grid before it's out in production on sort of the general version, it gives you 6 weeks to do that. And then before that, we have Nightly. And Nightly is exactly what the name says. It's updated nightly. So it's a constant place where we're pushing new features, patches, changes. So if you're like to live on the wild side, Nightly is really fun. You get a much earlier version and view, but you're not necessarily getting exactly the thing that will be showing up in a release. So Nightly is updated pretty much continuously. We have a named update every 6 weeks or so. So all the things follow sort of the same timeline. It's just sort of each 6 weeks you get to see earlier. So we currently, in Nightly, it's 57, which is kind of our big performance release, which gets me to talking a bit about big stuff that's happening in Firefox. I've been at Mozilla, like I said, around 5 years, and this is a pretty amazing release for us. It's very exciting. Huge increases in performance. What we're seeing is Firefox is at least twice as fast, just in sort of the internal metrics that we've been running. What we're hearing from people who are using it in Nightly is that it feels really fast. We've been doing a switch over to multi-process architecture. That started rolling out earlier this summer. We're pushing out more pieces that enable that. We also have something we're calling Quantum. Quantum is sort of our big project to modernize Firefox. There's a lot of components to it. But we're rolling out Quantum CSS. So this is a brand new engine for CSS inside Firefox. It makes an immense difference. It's much smoother, much faster, reduces a lot of the sort of jank as you're, and then we have Quantum Compositor. So this is, again, just how we do rendering. It is the first step towards web render, which is a much bigger project that will roll out later on this year. And this really just is how we compile graphics. We're moving from using the CPU to using the GPU. So relying more on the graphics card to do that image processing than the computer, which also really helps performance. And then we have active tab prioritization. So basically, if you have a bunch of tabs open, it focuses and prioritizes the tab you're actually looking at versus all the things that are running in the background in your other tab. So again, that gives a much better performance. We also have new features. We're calling our design refresh Photon because we really like things like photon, electron, and quantum, and cool terms like that. And it really is talking about sort of a huge shift in the way we do things. We're doing container tabs. This is so you can actually open a tab as a container, so it is a self-contained tab. So if you have, say, 3 different email accounts, you can actually have a tab for each one, so they won't constantly be interfering with them on different profiles. I use this a lot, I like it. And then we're moving to web extensions for add-ons. Does anybody know web extensions or use web extensions? So Firefox has had a very robust system of add-ons. It was built into our underlying engine, which is called Gecko. Web extensions is a standard way of building extensions on the browser. Chrome uses web extensions, so do all the other browsers in one form or another. So we're moving to web extensions. This will also really help performance, but it also gives us a standard. It's much easier if you as a developer want to build an extension to the browser. You can have it working on Chrome and Firefox and so forth and so on, as opposed to have to individually write the code for each one and understand all the underlying characteristics of each engine. So it's a really helpful thing for people. And there's something we call activity stream, which is just changing how the content shows up on a new tab. And our developer tools, people here write CSS? Anybody? Yeah? I know you do. So we have a CSS layout panel. Earlier this year, we launched the CSS Grid Inspector, which is really awesome. We've expanded that capability, so there's actually a panel within the Firefox developer tools that lets you do deeper examination of your CSS, and particularly around things like grid and Flexbox. We have a new designs and themes, so again, sort of doing a refresh of the look of Firefox. And then we're also, in the spirit of really supporting web extensions, our dev tools are actually going to be moving to become web extensions as opposed to built into the actual engine of Firefox. This lets us do updates faster and be a lot more responsive. I'm going to pause here. Am I talking too fast? I talk really fast usually. Is everything okay? You guys are good? All right. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm part of Developer Outreach We sit in Mozilla's Emerging Technologies group, which is a combination of research, R&D, and then thinking broadly, sort of long-term about the web stack. What happens in ET, in addition to sort of all of our developer work, is we're building research projects. A lot of those research projects are aimed at thinking about how will the web and the internet look in 3 to 5 to 10 years. Some projects that have come out of that is the Rust language. Does anybody here know the Rust language? Rust is a new programming language. It was primarily built to address some of the issues with C++ and sort of server-side programming. One of its strongest features is enhanced security. We're using Rust to build a lot of the new components of our Firefox engine and sort of pushing those into the architecture of the browser. One of those is something called Servo. So again, that's our engine. We're not replacing Gecko, which was the original engine of Firefox, but we're taking the best parts of Servo and embedding those into the browser, sort of replacing some of the older, outdated elements. We're also been working on WebAssembly, which is essentially functions as a virtual CPU in your browser. It compiles things. It was originally designed for speeding up gaming and giving gaming in the browser essentially the same type of performance that you have in native games. But it has a lot of applications for web developers as well, because that type of increased performance and ability to have those rich experiences is something I think all web developers want to do. And then obviously we have WebVR and A-Frame. Fabienne will be following me and talking in depth about that, so I won't go too deep into it. And then we have something called Project Quantum. I was talking about how we have different Firefox releases. Our big release in November is 57. We also call that release Firefox Quantum because so much of this long-term quantum project is rolling into that release. And that's really taking Servo, the thing I just mentioned. We have a project called Stylo, which is upgrading our CSS engine using those components of Servo. So again, it really just makes our CSS and graphics processing much smoother and much faster. And then we have, again, moving towards web render, which is, again, sort of moving to that graphics, doing our processing on the graphics processor as opposed to the CPU. And we have a lot of other things that we're working on, so augmented reality, mixed reality. We're doing a lot of projects around speech and keeping sort of things much more open source. There's a lot of stuff. If you're interested in experimenting with things, I highly recommend downloading Firefox Nightly. Like I said, it's a little bit of a walk on the wild side, but it is a chance to really see sort of how is the browser evolving quickly. Try out web extensions or write a web extension. We're looking for more of those. Try out A-Frame, and we'll have opportunity for people to see VR coming up. And then we have WebAssembly. There's a lot of components that you can use to build sort of those really rich experiences. Lynn Clark, who works at Mozilla, has done a fantastic series of blog posts written in cartoons to really dig into what WebAssembly is and sort of all the benefits. If you look at Mozilla Hacks and look for WebAssembly, there's a whole series of articles that I highly recommend. And then we also have our speech projects. And what we're doing with speech is in the sort of standard Mozilla tradition of keeping the internet open. We're looking at the world of voice and speech and seeing that it's more and more dominated by people like Google and AWS who are really interested in keeping their systems closed. And we feel like all developers should be able to access open source. So things like voice and speech. So we actually have a project called Common Voice, which we're having people record their voices and languages and making those available as an open source project. So as developers want to build out more voice recognition or speech capabilities, you're not stuck in one specific ecosystem or paying a specific provider, that you'll have those capabilities available to you. So Common Voice and speech are things that we're investing in and trying and moving forward as Mozilla. So that's just a very fast, quick review of Firefox and our emerging technologies. I'll be around after this if you have any questions, or like I said, you can always find me on Twitter. And now I'd like to welcome Fabian up to talk about WebVR and A-Frame.